Okay, welcome to episode 19 of the Total Hockey Training Podcast. I am your host, Sean Scahan. And before I introduce my next guest, we are in the postseason phase of our online program, Total Hockey Training, and that is available at trainheroic.com. It's $39 a month. Also, you get a free 7-day trial to like it or not. And usually people stick around, so that's great. My next guest is Josh Levine. Josh has over a decade of training and coaching athletes experience. He is the founder of Fortis Academy in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. Josh, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you on. Give us your story. Like, I'm looking at your bio, and I know that you went to Princeton University. And how do you go to Princeton? I don't imagine you went to Princeton with the intention of becoming a coach, strength and conditioning coach, or maybe you did, I don't know. But talk about that. Talk about, where you're from, your hockey
Yeah.
background, and what led you all the way to becoming the founder of Fortis Academy.
Yeah. So I grew up in Bloomington, Minnesota. I played hockey here, played all bunch of sports, ran track in high school. Hockey was my main one, played soccer kind of in the middle school grades. And what really got me on this path was meeting Jack Blatherwick. And for those that don't know, Jack trained the 1980 Olympic team and is obviously a very smart and knowledgeable. And at the time, he was incredibly innovative in hockey training in the 80s and 90s. He was way ahead of the curve for a lot of people. And so I met him my eighth grade year. I think after my eighth grade year in the summer, started training with him over at Benilde St. Margaret's. And he just lit a passion for doing things a little differently. I liked how he was, I loved the sandbags. I loved the focus on hockey specific athleticism or sports specific athleticism versus stuff that you just get stronger in the gym. And it's like, well, what's the point of that if it doesn't translate onto the ice or the field or wherever your sport takes place? And so I liked that so much that following summer, I ended up starting training at a local park. I couldn't drive. I'd bike down to the park. At the time, the association, so I grew up playing for Jefferson, and they would, this was back when they would actually mail out a booklet and had everyone's name in the association with their address, like where they lived. And so I just mailed out brochures to all the squirts and peewees or something like that, and said, come down to Dred Scott Fields in Bloomington, and we'll work with your kid. And it was nothing crazy. We do some push-ups, maybe some lunges or something, all body weight. Didn't have any equipment, and then we'd play soccer or tag games or whatever. But I started doing training actually relatively early. Then I've been doing it now for about 20 years. So that was about 2004 when I started doing that, and then kept doing it kind of throughout high school. Started the Fortis Academy in 2008, 2009. And then did that every summer. So instead of getting that traditional internship that a lot of my Princeton classmates were doing, I just felt like, well, this is really fun. I'm enjoying it. I get to build something that's my own. So why not? Let's keep trying this. And so I just kept doing that. And then my wife was in the Army. So we had to go to Washington, D.C. So I thought, well, I don't know. I may want to come back to Minnesota, and I may want to do Fortis again. I've never really done it outside of this 8-week summer internship, if you will. 8 or 10 weeks in the summer was what I did. And when we had our first child in DC, Eliana, I've got 3 kids now. That's when we looked at each other and just said, it's time to get back home. We want to be by the grandparents, make sure our kids know their grandparents. And at that point, I thought, well, now's a decent time to just go for it and see what happens. It seems like everything's kind of aligning. I have to come back. I don't really know what I want to do in Minnesota for work. So maybe I just give Fortis a shot. And my wife and I sat down and we said, okay, we'll give it 1 year and then we'll reevaluate after a year, kind of see where things are at. And after that first year, we were having fun. And decided to just keep going with it. And I've been going now for about 7.5 years.
That is awesome. That's a great story. And you just chose your passion. You knew what you were passionate about and you gave it your all. I like that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I want to talk about Jack real quick. Jack, I'm a big Jack fan. I actually, I mean, I guess I knew of Jack when I was a grad student at the University of Minnesota back in 99, 2000. And I remember finding his doctorate thesis in the library at the U then. And you said he was an early innovator. I mean, was he ever? He was talking about sprinting in the application of on ice speed in terms of, you know, your faster players off the ice, where usually your better skaters on the ice. And that was, I mean, that was obviously back in the early 1980s when the whole direction of hockey training was kind of in that training the aerobic system, increasing VO2 max. And Jack was just big on getting your legs fast or your body fast, but getting your legs stronger. And yeah, he has a book that's out. I mean, it's been out for God, 40 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Or 30, 40 years, and it still has some pretty good applications. Like he was talking about pairing exercises then in that book and talking about getting the legs stronger and running sprints and the plyo boxes, all that stuff. So he's definitely an early innovator, a great human. And I got to know Jack at the scouting combines when I was working in the NHL. And funny story that I always try to beat him there in the morning. I think the doors open at 6 and try to get a seat next to him. I could never beat him for some reason, but then I realized that his his van was in the parking lot and he drove to the combine and parked in the parking lot and just woke up and walked in there every day. Just a smart human that I would just try to pick his brain whenever I could during those scouting combine days and get to know. And I've actually visited with him at New Hope Arena, and he's
Mm.
still doing it, right? He's still coaching.
Yeah, he's still training. He actually does a little bit of training out at Champions Hall, or has last couple summers, which is where one of our gyms is located with Fortis. So I've run into him there every spring, and I always love to pick his brain too. And it's interesting, he was so innovative then, and I would say almost it's kind of like a lot has changed in hockey training, but then a lot doesn't seem like it necessarily has. Like we're kind
Yeah.
of old ways die hard, man. We had our college athletes out on the turf this summer training. Quick little story, and towards the end of the summer, they have to start getting ready for certain tests that they are going to have to do when they go to school. And
Mhm.
whether I agree with the test or not, I have to make sure that they're ready to go. And so if they have to do barbell deadlift and heavy, I don't want them going in the fall and never having done it all summer. So
Right.
even though we don't personally do that in our own, we don't do that in Fortis programming. We would do trap bar instead. But we still need to make sure that they know what they're doing, and we kind of work through them a little bit and kind of get over that initial phase of an exercise where it's just kind of new and you gain a
Mhm.
lot just doing it a few times. But we also would do some conditioning tests, and I knew Jack was on the other side of the field at the time, and I just knew he's looking down, going, "What the heck is Josh doing?" And so one of the athletes went down there to say hi to him, and sure enough, he was like, "What are you guys doing? What And it was basically Jack. We don't like it we don't
Yeah.
like it just as much as you, but the fact is that we can't have our athletes go to college and then fail. They don't have to be the best guy at a
Yeah.
test that doesn't translate to hockey, but we don't want the coach looking at that list of guys and going, why is this guy not passing a conditioning test coming in? So
Yeah.
there's still a lot of that. I think where uh, my bias is more towards Jack's side, where the faster you are, that means the less work you have to put in different situations on the ice. So you might
Mhm.
only have to use 80% of your sprint speed to make a play versus someone else who's just always pushing the foot is all the way down on the pedal. And it's like, that's partially why they gas out so soon. It's not necessarily always you know, VO2 max issue. It might just be that they're not fast enough and that the whole game they're basically drowning, trying to keep up in terms of speed. So you increase the
Absolutely.
speed. I think it also has this benefit on the conditioning side.
Oh, I agree 100%. Like the faster you can help someone get, the easier everything is going to be, including
Mm,
conditioning tests, whether it's a 300-yard shuttle done
mm.
twice and with 5 minutes rest or 110-yard sprints, whatever. I don't even know if that I don't think that happens at the NHL anymore, but I mean, maybe in the college hockey realm,
There's
they
a
still
lot of
test.
beep tests still
Beep
in
test.
college.
Okay.
Lot of beep tests, which is just straight running for however long you can keep up with the beep, of course, right?
Yeah.
So that can, some guys I think can go quite a ways.
Now, how do you see when I was in the NHL, I would always make sure my tests in the NHL, you might have a handful of guys who train with you during the off season at the facility, but reality is most of your athletes went away back home. And when I designed my testing protocols, I knew they wouldn't be doing my program, but I wanted to have tests in there that I wanted them to get better at from an injury preventive standpoint. For example, we would do, you know, chin ups with 10% of their body weight around their waist, how many they can do. And I
Mhm.
always knew myself, okay, they're at least going to be practicing this during the summer. Maybe they're not doing chin ups, for example, but I know that they're going to practice this test. And for me, knowing that, okay, if a lot of our guys are practicing this chin up test, we have a better chance of not sustaining shoulder injuries. I looked at it that way. So how do you incorporate some of those exercises that maybe a college hockey player has to test in when they get to campus in September?
Yeah, we like to kind of phase in testing throughout the summer. So 1 week, we might on our first upper body core day, assuming we have an athlete that's coming in at least 4 days a week, we would do that type of split, and we'd say, okay, well, when they get to school, they need to do body weight bench
Hmm.
test. So before we get into the workout today, you're just going to quick hit, do a body weight bench test. We'll record their data. We don't want it to be, a single rep max. So if they're not strong enough to do a few reps at their body weight, we would just lower the weight and then over time increase it. But we throw that test in maybe every 2 weeks.
Hmm.
Um, and then as we get towards the end, that's when we really hammer home like, okay, what's the okay, we have to do body weight, bench, chest, and then we have to do pull-ups. Do you have to do them on the same day? You got to do them. Okay, what order do we have to do them when you get to school? Oh, you got to do body weight, bench first. Okay, let's do that, and then right after it, you got 2 minutes rest, 3 minutes rest, or whatever. Let your arms come back a little bit, and then we're going to go to pull-ups because that's kind of what it's going to look like when you get to school. And a lot of that for me is I think more mental for the athlete, especially for our freshmen, to
Hmm.
just know that, okay, I'm good. I'm in range. I've done this once. I've done it twice or whatever it is where I've actually kind of gone through the testing protocol and I feel comfortable about I think a lot of it too is even just weights. I've talked to a lot of our athletes where they're like, I just don't even know what to put on the testing happens.
Yeah.
Some schools don't have a ton of resources where there's like 10 strength coaches in there. So
Right.
you got 30 potentially hockey players and how many staff do you have? So you can kind of get lost in the shuffle. So just even helping them with like, okay, when you do this, put this weight on to warm up, then move up to this weight, then your 3 rep max is going to be around here. That just takes out so much of the pressure for athletes as they go into the fall.
Yeah. I want to touch upon that. Like, do you find that your athletes get a little bit of anxiety before they head back for the
Yeah,
tests?
I think I've seen it at a bunch of different levels, not just juniors, college, and above even, where there's just kind of a
Mhm.
nervousness about those conditioning tests in particular, I think, and just how the coach is going to perceive, how they do on that.
Mhm.
Some coaches, some places it's different. Sometimes it's kind of
Yeah.
like, well, we're just doing testing to do testing, and it's not that big of a deal. But other places, it is. You have to hit this mark, or coach is going to be sitting you down and talking to you. And I think in those instances, I definitely see a lot more anxiety from the players.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's interesting because, like, as long as I did it in the professional ranks, I always I was guilty of thinking that, like you said, I thought our guys really didn't care. Like I really thought that I always felt that, they didn't take it as serious as I did. And you're in the NHL, like they just think they got to show up. But then it hit me like a truck, a few years back when our sports psychologist was like, "Hey, so and so is really worried about this test." I was kind of like, "What?" why is that guy worried about that test? And it really hit me like, my God, these guys, one, they really do care. And two, like, we got to help them, in reality is in the professional ranks, it usually it's like one or two tests, where a coach or a GM might really care. They just want to see improvement for an individual player. But the
Yeah,
reality is you care for about 1 or 2 days, then the scrimmages happen, and it's like, oh, okay, whatever. Like he's really good, so
yeah,
that's reality there. But it was interesting for me to learn that the athletes really did care about the test that I put together. It for me, it was always body composition. And then we did a skating test at some point, and we had guys practicing this skating test and like timing how many strides it took to get down the ice. And I was like, it's getting back to me like, what? Wait, what are they talking about? You just got to go do 3 hard and you're done. And no, these guys were it was very eye-opening for me. And then, yeah, like at
mm,
the college ranks, yeah, if you're a freshman or maybe you're not a scholarship kid, you know, that's a big deal because you don't want to stick out in a negative way, right?
totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I always tell if it's a test that we don't find to have a super strong correlation for the athlete on ice success, I want them somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Like I don't want them at the bottom. I want them to be able to pass. If it's a test that we think translates, like a 10-yard fly or a 20-yard dash or a vertical jump, we're testing those constantly. Those
Yeah.
are very important.
No, that's good. And also like you want to make sure your athletes feel good about themselves with where they are. If they're working on that body weight bench press and they increase during the summer, they feel pretty good about themselves when they go in for that period of time at whatever preseason in college or something like that, right?
Totally. Yep. A
Yeah.
lot of confidence, knowing that I tell athletes all the time, it's like you can you can deserve to be on the team or you can deserve to be on the power play or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you get that opportunity. And the off season is about putting in the work to deserve to be there. And then the rest of it, you can't control everything, but putting in that work definitely gives you the confidence that, okay, I've done everything that I need to do to put myself in a position to have that opportunity.
Love that. That's great. So you mentioned Cardiac Jack, obviously. Now, who else is like influences in your training and coaching for you?
Yeah, well, we do on ice and for hockey, we do a lot of camps, clinics, edge work, skills work, and then we do gym. And so on the gym side, obviously Jack Blatherwick's huge. Mike Boyle, who I know you know very well, I very much respect him. Listen to a lot of his content, podcasts, gone through his CFSC modules, and found those to be incredibly helpful. And I like his philosophy on unilateral strength in particular. I think it's just makes a lot of sense to me to have that risk. I think the reward ratio is higher. I think the risk tolerance, risk ratio is a little bit lower. So you have more reward, less risk in the weight room, particularly for high school athletes. And even like middle school, it's like just totally the way to go. I love it. On the ice, Andy Ness and Barry Karn and Kathleen Gossich are some of my favorite skating instructors, and I think they do a really good job teaching the fundamentals of skating, which is, you know, it's not rocket science, but at the same time, it can get really, really technical the higher you go up, and the more you're trying to work with an athlete. I mean, you can spend a whole hour just on turning, and
Yeah.
and you could be doing that with a college athlete, and who's really good at hockey, but it has little bits to improve here and there, filming them, etc. And so those guys and Kathleen, Barry, and Andy do a great job.
Well, I can definitely vouch for Andy because I worked with him for several years, and he would coach my own sons at some point. But more
Mm,
importantly, it was which I think is imperative, it was the communication between myself as the strength and conditioning coach, sports performance coach, with the skating coach, with the volume of skating versus what we're doing in the weight room, specifically for injured players coming back for that return to play protocol. He's
mm,
really good. Um, does a great job, and his mom
Yeah.
is a legend as well. And you
Yep. I
mentioned
skated with
Mike.
her when I was growing up.
Oh, she's phenomenal. You mentioned
Yep.
Mike, and just a little plug for the show here. Mike was my most recent guest in a really great episode, so please check that out. I want to ask you about your business. So I'm also running my own facility now, and I want to talk about, Minnesota hockey. They have, for those that don't know, Minnesota hockey has the ability to work with their kids, meaning their teams get to work with them in the months of June and July. And a lot of times, you might have the high school strength and conditioning coach working out the hockey players for that period of time. It's a significant chunk of time. June and July, the high school hockey coaches can be around the team. They have the week of 4th of July off. A lot of teams will skate, they'll practice. A lot of teams will actually scrimmage in the middle of the summer, which I think is bizarro. And a lot of it is training. And so now I get it. Like, you have these kids who, I'm going to school X, and if I don't go to these summer workouts, I'm going to be left behind on the team. And I've seen that. I've worked with some teams, and like, these kids have to show up, or, they might not get the best opportunity at tryouts in November. So as a private company, how do you deal with that? Because that's one question I wanted to ask you.
Dealing with like basically
Well,
the June, July
yeah, like,
section
maybe
where,
maybe you have some kids who go to this high school, and
oh, yeah,
they have their
yeah,
summer STP going on at the same time you're training them.
yes.
How do you
Yeah, we have a
balance that?
lot of that. Yeah, we have a lot of that. A couple things when it comes to on ice. We tell our athletes for June and July, we do run some STPs. So we have some high school coaches that actually come to us and say, "Hey, you run the skills. I'll run the small area games or scrimmage day or whatever." And that's a really nice way of being able to be involved in an STP and make it a training focus. Because actually, in reality, most STPs in the summer on the ice do not work on training. I mean, they typically will resemble more of like a high school practice, which
Yes.
makes sense because generally they're run by high school coaches, and so it might be some flow drills and then some scrimmaging, some
Hmm.
3v3 or some 4v4, and I don't think that's like bad. I don't think it's this crazy, what are these guys doing? But it's definitely not like the skills training that you do like what we do, where
Hmm.
we're really trying to hone in on, let's say, wall play or quick release shots or edge work or something like that. So it's nice for us to be able to come in there. But with athletes that go to STPs where we're not involved at all, let's say, I tell them it's very important for you to be a part of your team,
Hmm.
and I don't want we're not going to be a spot where you can just don't go away from your team to come to us.
Right.
But what we can do is we can talk to your coach. Like, let's have a conversation with the coach. I have not had one high school coach in Minnesota that has had an issue with this, where I'll ask the athlete, you go talk to coach and just say, hey, listen, I've got this training opportunity with Josh and Fortis or whatever, and I'd like to be able to do it. And I also want to be able to do STP. Is there a way for me, maybe on Tuesdays, maybe they're a senior, they're a rising senior, and on Tuesdays they want to come skate with like our junior college group, and we think that group would fit for them and it'd benefit them. Well, then we'll talk to their coach and just say, okay, hey, is this all right with you? And I've never had one coach ever have an issue with that when it's communicated directly. And also, I've told the coaches, I said, if whoever's training with us ever shows up to STP and thinks that they're better than the team, you send me a text and they will not come back until they humble up, because that's the one thing I cannot stand in Minnesota high school hockey is like
Hmm.
okay, I'm the big dog, whatever. And you see so many guys, it's such a disservice to them. They get to the USHL and then they realize,
They're
oh,
humbled pretty quick.
yeah, they're humbled really quick. It'd be
Hmm.
better to go through that humility process when you're in high school and just realize I can't take a summer off before I go to the USHL. There's going to be really good hockey players from California and New Jersey and everywhere. Like, they're coming
Everywhere.
from all over now. And then in terms of the gym, I think that's because sometimes I think that one's actually an even easier conversation with the coach, because a lot of times the coach is just outsourcing that to like the high school gym.
Mhm.
And I think there's ways of sort of collaborating there, depending on how many days a week they're doing it. So maybe an athlete's going Monday, Wednesdays, with their high school program, and they're doing the upper body exercises of that program. I typically will steer them more towards the upper body if they're doing a high school STP weight room program. I then say, okay, sprints, plyometrics, and leg strength for hockey. Let's do that with us, and let's see if coach is cool with that. That way, you're showing I'm going to be there with the team. I'm going to support the team, but I've also got some goals, and I know this training here is going to really help me with it. And I think that's one way that we've approached it. But this goes back to our conversation with Jack and the innovations that he's had. It's amazing to me the state of a lot of high school training programs.
Mhm.
A lot of them are pretty old school in
Oh
terms of
yeah.
their methodologies and approach. And, and that's even crazier given the fact that a lot of times they're super understaffed and you got 30 kids in a weight room. I
Mhm.
mean, I just can't imagine the stress that would be on me trying to make sure everyone's back squatting correctly.
Right.
Would be insane. I'd
Right.
rather just have them doing lunges or something where the risk, if someone's doing it a little off, is very minimal, versus something like that. And so that also comes into play. There's a lot of athletes that I sometimes I'm looking at some of these programs and actually thinking this is almost, this is an injury risk.
Oh, 100%.
Why are we doing back squat to failure 3 sets? I've actually seen that. Why
Right.
is this, this is not right. You should not be doing this.
Right.
So
100%. And I've been there. I worked with Hill Murray probably 5 or 6 years ago, and we had like JV and varsity. I would split them in two groups, and I'd be in the weight room, and I'd have my interns doing the outside, the sprints, the plyos, and inside was not. We weren't doing that. We were doing things, but and I had to be kind of a. It's different because I was very strict on these kids where, you know, that you're going to do this right, and you have to have like everyone paying attention. It's very challenging, very
it
challenging.
is. It
And my
is.
thing is like about the scrimmages, like I've seen tournaments in the summer at Bloomington Ice Garden. Actually, they have like high school scrimmages,
Yep.
and I don't get that. Now, what do you think about like where I don't understand Minnesota high school hockey? Is like, okay, the coaches are with them June and July, which is great. But then there's no contact allowed between August 1st and tryouts in November. And so
Mm.
a lot of these kids, couple things. One, a lot of these kids don't know what to do, or they don't know what direction they go, because maybe they don't play football, maybe they don't play soccer, or whatever is in the fall in Minnesota.
Yep.
And a lot of times what I run into when I had those guys going to their STP and coming to see me, they would try to do both. And I'm like, that's the last thing that you want to do for yourself
Yes.
to have a good year next year. So,
Yes.
um, like, what do
Yes. Sometimes I
like,
think sometimes the hard thing about this business is sometimes you literally have to tell someone, especially if they're not willing to have a more balanced approach to the training. You just have to tell them you can't come do my training and then also do that training and then expect this to be
sure,
beneficial to you. One, you're not going to get the gains because you're going to be so. By the time you come do a 10-yard fly with me to get your sprint speed up, you're already at 50%. So
right,
what's the point here?
right,
And then your injury risk is going up big time. I mean,
through the roof.
you're very likely to have an overuse injury, and those are becoming more and more common. If you skate in that program and you skate in our program and you skate in this other thing that you're trying to do, and then you get up at 5 a.m. and do that thing, you're tracking to an L5 stress fracture right now.
Mhm.
So, and that the hard part with that is, you obviously in our industry, then you and I, if we tell someone that, we're losing out on that revenue. But I think it's the right thing to do, and over time, I'm hopeful. I think parents are starting to see this and starting to understand that, you can kind of get away with it when they're 10. You can have them skating 12 months a year, and the kid's probably going to be all right. Um, Although even at that age, we're starting to have kids with issues, which is insane. But once you get to that, what I tell parents, we do a parent seminar with Fortis with our leadership program. We go into associations, and I tell them, we show this chart. you can see the skeletal system on average, taking off around like 13, 14 and a half. 14 and a half is like peak height velocity for males, right? Well, the muscular system kind of takes a little bit of time before it starts catching up. It's kind of like the skeletal system starts doing this, and then, a year and a half later, the muscular system starts coming up. And that's typically where I'm seeing a lot of L5 stress fractures, FAI in the hip, labral tears that are,
Osgood Slatters,
symptomatic.
Osgood Slatters.
Yep, see that a lot. Yep, see that all the time. And it's right in that window, 12 to 15, when I think you really have the highest rates of overuse injuries starting to happen, at least just anecdotally from what I'm seeing in the gym.
Yeah. Former physical therapist with the Wild, John Bottoms.
Yeah.
He talked about Bantam back. And 100%. You see these kids who, you just said it, their bones grow longer and the muscles haven't caught up to the length of the bones. And I've seen it. Yeah, it's certainly out there. And I probably know 5 or 6 kids who had to deal with Bantam back at some point in their career.
So Edina, Coach Elbing over at Edina, he's come guest spoke at some of these leadership seminars in Edina. He'll come in and talk to the parents for a few minutes while we're going over long-term athletic development and leadership. And I think those two things go together, because when you don't understand long-term athletic development, that's when the FOMO kicks in first grade, and you think that your second grader is an all-star, and you just kind of start going down this road that doesn't, even a peewee. I mean, I get such a kick out of it. It's like, so-and-so's great. I'm like, well, yeah, he's 6'2", so he's like 15 playing against 11-year-olds. So I can see how he's winning a lot of these battles in the corner. But Coach Elbing has talked about at tryouts, I think, was it last year, they've had historically like 6 or 8 kids out, not able to try out due to L5 stress fracture. Well, Edina Bantams have about 200 kids. Right. They have 10 teams. So if you include goalies and everything, and then you look at that number and you're going, that's the number of kids that have the L5 stress fracture at the time of tryouts. So how many kids throughout the year had the stress fractures and just weren't able to compete? Right. Or were able to compete during tryouts. And those numbers are way off. And I tell parents, listen, you can I concede that you can get unlucky in a sense. Like maybe it can just happen. Maybe your kid's playing hockey and baseball and golf and pickleball all summer, and they're growing, and you get a stress fracture. Okay. But if that does happen to your child, I think you should look at, okay, what have we done for the last year? How many weeks, if we take consecutive weeks, or full weeks, how many weeks off have they had where they've had 7 days in a row? Has it been 0? You might want to look at that, because my recommendation is 3 months throughout a year during some of those phases. And people look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm saying, well, take a week here, July 4th. Do you go to the cabin? I mean, do something besides hockey. So take a full 10 days. Okay. And if you keep adding that up over time, a week in August, hopefully a month to 6 weeks after the season, you actually get to 3 months pretty quick.
100%. And it's kind of funny, because when someone is diagnosed with that, what's the prescription? 3 months of no activity. Right. And people can't comprehend that. They don't understand that, because there's so much going on that they think that they're going to miss out on, like you alluded to. It's 3 months of no activity. That's nothing. Like you can obviously go to physical therapy and get better, but that 3 months is the time it takes for the body to reset itself. And I think I've seen people like, we'll probably give it a month and a half. I'm like, no, don't do that, because you're just asking for it to occur again. And I think that's
or
the
Foley break, thing. which is then a if it Foley breaks, that's a long-term issue for the child, and and that's just wrong. And to some extent, I wonder if parents at any point are going to be legally liable for some of I mean, I'm seeing overuse injuries with kids. I'm seeing kids with knee surgeries at 12. Yeah. And, and who are still hobbling around 6 months later, having pain when they're doing skips or whatever. And I'm thinking, well, this is now borderline like criminal in terms of what is happening to some of these kids. And then you think about it in terms of windows of trainability, which I just would describe as times in a child's life or an athlete's life, excuse me, along that developmental pathway when they are going to have the greatest return on investment. Okay, so if I take an 11-year-old into the gym, what they're getting is they're getting an understanding of how to train. They're learning how to do exercises, and by learning how to do them, they're going to be able to do a little bit more weight. There might be some neurological adaptations, motor neuron adaptations that allow them to lift a little bit more, so they're stronger in that sense. They're not going to gain muscle, like they have no testosterone. Any speed gains are going to be relatively minimal at that age. But give me a 16-year-old male, like, I mean, in 1 year, that individual might jump 4 to 6 inches higher. And that's not all due to the training. That's due to that sort of growth, maturation, the testosterone kicking in, all the conditions being optimal. And how many kids are we seeing now when they hit that optimal window? Well, not only you have the literal L5 stress fracture that takes them up for 3 months, but then you have the more insidious one, which is the sort of like, they kind of look at you with like glazed eyes when they come in the gym. Like, it's like, this is like the 12th year they've been in a gym training, and you're like, you don't really look like you want to be here.
Right.
You're kind of a ghost. And that always pains me, because I'm looking at them like, you have so much potential and we're not going to reach it because you burnt out and you're 16. Like, brutal.
That's why I think for me, unfortunately, you do have these one sport athletes, pretty predominantly hockey players that I work with. And for me, strength and conditioning, not just strength training, but also the movement preparation, the plyos, the sprint work. I kind of look at it like another sport for that kid. And it's important for me to, sometimes you have to teach them, which is, different than when I grew up as a child or yourself. You have to teach them how to skip. You have to teach them how to do a butt kick. You have to teach them how to do a high knee run. And they're going to get the most they can out of that. But a lot of these kids don't have those fundamental movement patterns there. Do you see a lot of that? Do you see a lot of kids
100%. I'll see kids
hockey?
skip. I'll see them skip, and they'll take their left knee up in there and their left arm at the same time. And I'm like, that just doesn't even feel natural to me. I'd have trouble trying to do that the way you do it. And we totally see that. It's actually one thing we've done is we have a sports day camp now that we run on school days off, and it's 8:45 to 3:15, and we'll play basically 10 different sports for about 30 minutes each. We'll do handball, floor hockey, spike ball, wall ball, football, World Cup, soccer 3v3, you name it. And it's the good news is that naturally kids want to just do that. Like we literally have kids train, in quotes, for 6 hours playing sports on the turf and courts, and their parents come pick them up, and they're like, they're not tired. I brought my son and daughter the other day. For the first time, I had my kids actually be able to do a camp that I run, and they came. I drive them home after. I get into the driveway. My son goes, "Dad, want to play hockey?" And I'm like, "Dude, I am gassed. I just did 15,000 steps following all you kids around for 6 hours, 7 hours. I kind of want a little bit of a break." That's the natural impulse for kids, is to just explore their different movements. And I think from ages 4, let's say, or even 3, like balance bikes and all these different things you can do, up through 10, that's like this optimal window of trainability for physical literacy. And so many kids are losing that because they have to do summer hockey at 6. And if that works for your family schedule, great. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do, but don't do it to the exclusion of other sports at that age, because you are going to limit that window. And one other thing you mentioned is like strength and conditioning be the other sport. And Mike Boyle's talked about this in terms of like, can you have like, what is sport specific to hockey? What's sport specific to lacrosse, et cetera, when it comes to strength training? And one thing I'm seeing, I'm curious if you're seeing this, is people are taking that, and because of marketing and the information asymmetry between the parents and us as the strength coaches, they're taking that and making sort of like an absurdly sport specific program. Like everything looks like a stride, let's say, right? Everything looks exactly like it does on the ice. Well, the problem with that is now strength and conditioning becomes hockey.
Yeah.
Like you're just doing hockey off the ice. And if you only do hockey off the ice and then hockey on the ice, now you don't get the benefit of taking strength training as a complement to hockey. So, okay, you're getting quad dominant, let's focus on glute activation. Or, we're doing a lot of rotation when we're shooting, let's do some anti-rotation core work. Let's counterbalance all the movements that you're doing and strengthen the muscles that, because of this repeated stimulus, are getting weak. That, it's kind of counterintuitive, and then that will ultimately make you a better hockey player. So sometimes the weight room is totally a different sport, and it should be viewed that way too, because it's not always going to be an exact replica of what you're doing in your sport, and that's for good reason too.
It's a great point. I just believe in play other sports. I know people, it's a broken record, but it's not getting out there. Like the other sports that you play, in our case, we're talking about hockey here, can help you be a better hockey player. Like soccer, controlling the puck on your foot, golf, hand-eye coordination, baseball, hand-eye coordination, sprinting in baseball, football. A lot of things translate to the game, and I think the bigger that base is you're going to have a better athlete no matter what you choose to do. Maybe it's not even hockey. It makes me think, a friend of mine just told me this story recently. His cousin is dating a very high-end hockey player, second-round pick, plays university somewhere. And I've heard the name. The kid's a stud. And they were at the beach and they started playing catch. And the kid really looked out of place playing catch with a baseball. Like there's still those ones that make it, that their skill and their talent is so unbelievable, but they can't throw a baseball, which is, it's alarming. But most kids need those other attributes to help them be successful in hockey, if that's what they want to do later on in their.
Totally. And I mean, there's a great book by David Epstein called The Sports Gene.
Mhm.
And it talks about the influence of genetics on sports performance. And, one of the best examples is basically, in the NBA, no one's wingspan is less than their height, right? So I was genetically disqualified from, playing basketball at conception. It's just, if you saw me, I am not designed to play basketball. If they put the hoop down on the floor, maybe, but the way the game currently is, it's not happening. And so sometimes what I think is happening there is there's that confluence of factors where, because so many people are being, there's so much pressure to be pushed into that specialization route, and the people that are doing that, it's like you're getting the phone calls from people that are asking for a rather large check to do the year-round specialization at 9. I have no incentive. I'm not calling a 9-year-old's parents. Like I got 3 kids. I've got a life, and then I've got, obviously, to managing Fortis. I'm not going to try to sell you something, because, well, you're too young anyways. We don't really sell the 9-year-olds for gym training, right? And so that's part of the problem, is there's the self-selection bias where the kids that are good get nabbed by the programs promoting sports specialization, and then everyone assumes that's how they got good. It's like, no, they got, what happens is the people are really good at recruiting. Like they're looking for the best players. And then you'll see that what happens is, it's so funny, some of these top end AAA groups at 7, you look at the roster 3 years later, there's almost no one who was on the roster at 7. It's like a completely different, they just keep cycling through, and kids drop, and they keep dropping them all the way up. They're just going to take the best players that they can possibly find. That's the way that so some of that's going in. And then, with your example here, this is where people have a hard time. They'll use that example, right? Those that are maybe trying to justify sports specialization, is they'll say, well, so-and-so only plays hockey, and look how great they are, right? They're really good at hockey. They can't catch a ball on the beach, but whatever, they're going to go play pro. I always wonder, well, how adaptable are they? And where could their game have gone had they just had a little bit of a wider base? Like, I don't think they had to have played 3 sports through their senior year of high school. That's right. Early specialization is prior to puberty. So some kids might be transitioning to just hockey by 14, 15, if they're, early on the maturation cycle. And that might be all right. And maybe they play 3v3 basketball down at the park with their buddies once in a while. You can do it where you're playing multiple sports, but you're not doing, club lacrosse,
Right. Yeah.
club soccer, and then trying to play AAA hockey and high school hockey. Like, that's just, those days are gone. You cannot play all three sports at that type of level, cost, and time. But you certainly can go play rec soccer. I put my Benilde guys back in the day, this was probably 6 years ago now, I was so sick of seeing some of this. I put them into 43 hoops, 3v3 basketball. It was the best thing. They would go on Sunday nights in the spring and they'd play 3v3 basketball against like legit JV basketball teams from around the metro.
That's cool.
And yeah, it was great. It was so good for their athleticism. They got their butt kicked the first few weeks, and then they started to build some skills, and it was really fun to see.
Yeah, I think about my own son, my older son, like both of them actually, they were playing soccer in California. They played baseball, they played lacrosse. Came out to Minnesota, we played flag football. And the reason was my son's tall and he played basketball too, but like I'm like, okay, he's not gonna play basketball because I didn't want some coach label him as the center.
Right.
He didn't play football because, one, I didn't want some coach saying like, you're going to be an offensive lineman. So he got to play flag football and be the quarterback, be the receiver. And then, yeah, and then I think around 14, he was just hockey, but he had that, he was exposed to other sports. He's able to go play 3-on-3 basketball. He's able to go and hit and play golf. Like, I think that's important. I think that's very important in, like we talked about, creating that base of athleticism,
Yeah.
So,
well,
good point.
The other thing is, and no one wants to think about this, but the guy that's a stud that's going to go play in the NHL, one, he's one injury away from that not happening, and then two, that will end at some point. Like, at some point, you're not going to be playing hockey, and most likely, given the numbers in NHL salaries, you're probably going to have to do something else. With your life. And so at that point, the danger of some of this becomes more on the psychological front. And I see this all the time where then they get done and they're like, okay, yeah, I can't go play golf because I just have never learned how. I can't go do anything. I can't even go play pickleball with my friends because I'm so bad at just hand-eye coordination. And I'm mentally just a hockey player. That's my entire identity that I have grown up with. And now it's done. That's a major mental health risk that causes a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and it's a disservice to these athletes when they become young men and women and they're floundering because, would you trade that for your son? Would you want to have him have a 7-year NHL career and then that's it? They peaked, life's over, like everything's downhill from there.
Well, that makes me think about, actually, I saw a tweet the other day. It said like all roads lead to the Bear Hockey League. And the next day, Bobby Ryan, who was a player who's been on the show, actually, he posted a picture of him getting ready to play his first beer league hockey game. So I'm like, that's very true. That's very true. So it's interesting. This has been great. Hey, talk about Fortis, talk about what else you guys do. I know you have a leadership program that you're passionate about, and talk about where people can find you and learn more about you and Fortis.
Yeah, I'll do just a quick brief overview. We're a holistic sports performance company. On the gym side, we have a gym in Champions Hall off 169 in Valley View and one in the Richfield Ice Rink off of 66th in Portland. We do gym training for all sports, not just hockey. Like, I think about 45% of our athletes are actually outside of the hockey. They're not just hockey players. They play other sports, or their other sport is like soccer or something. That's their main sport, or volleyball. So we work with multi-sport, we work with associations, clubs, work with individuals and small groups in our gyms. We also do those sports day camps I already mentioned. And then our leadership program, it's called Fortis Leaders. It's one of our major initiatives where we go into associations. We do parent seminars, we go over long-term athletic development, and then how parents can be helpful in creating a strong community culture And we've found some really good success with that. We've been doing it in Edina for a few years. We just did it over at Apple Valley, Burnsville. And it was really good to just get in front of the parents and say, listen, this is your association, and how do you build a great association? And for them, it's inverted. The natural inclination is find development, develop the kids, then try to retain them, and then recruit them. We say, no, flip that around. Recruit them, then retain them, then worry about what you have for development. But get your numbers first, make it fun, keep the kids there, make it accessible for families. That's something that I'm very passionate about, trying to get hockey associations to think a little bit more creatively about having consistent days for practices for different levels. And many people look at that problem and say it's not possible. I know it's possible. You have to have your JV team practice at 6 a.m. once a week, or you have to, you have your squirt group go at 6 a.m. once a week. You figure out ways to do it, and then you can actually get everyone in a rather consistent schedule. But so we do that. We go in, we do athlete seminars, and then we have a curriculum that associations can use so that their coaches can be saturating, if you will, this youth sport experience with leadership lessons. So there's about 10 to 12 lessons a year that the coach teaches. They're 5-minute quick hit. You read a quote or you read a scenario, and you ask a couple prompts or questions of your athletes to hear, kind of what they think about what should they do in this situation. If they see bullying, what should they do? You're just trying to get kids to talk about it. And they more often than not, they do a great job. And I've always been surprised. I just ran an athlete seminar at Burnsville, Apple Valley, and you get done with it and you're just not really sure who heard what, right? And then we got feedback that the next week, and I was talking about extreme ownership and take ownership for your community and take ownership for this hockey program and help with recruiting. And we found out that there was a kid at the Try Hockey for Free that they were hosting who had been at the leadership seminar, and the mom went up and told the association volunteer, he's here because of that seminar. That motivated him. And I had and during the time, you're like, I'm not even sure if anyone's listening. It kind of feels like that. So that's kind of, we're trying to take an aircraft carrier that's gotten way off course, and we're trying to tilt it every year a little bit to the right, in the right direction. And we know that if we do that long term, we're going to change the way youth sports are. So we're doing that. We have the Little Spartans thing in Richfield. We're restarting Richfield Youth Hockey. It's kind of a nonprofit initiative of ours, try to get kids playing in that community. And again, this shows just the hockey community. Sometimes I think we lack the ability to kind of think outside the box. Most people thought Richfield didn't have kids that wanted to play hockey. We had, I think, 58. 25 of them in the city of Richfield. They live in the school district of Richfield. I think another 20 to 25 lived in the Minneapolis school district. So they were just in South Minneapolis, where Richfield's a closer rink than Parade. And so that's another thing that we're doing. People can find us on our website, the FortisAcademy.com. And then we have our leadership website is FortisLeaders.com. And we have all of our different camps and clinics and training offerings up there. But
good.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. You should reach out to Darby about Richfield. I'm sure he'd be passionate and would be willing to get the word out about that, because he's from Richfield.
Totally. Our goal for next year is to double the program and to have 2 hours of ice.
Awesome.
And to, this year it was basically 4 to 11-year-olds all on one sheet. But we proved that the model can work. We've had some nice donations come in from the In Sports Foundation, is the nonprofit that's going to be helping operate the program. And then, we've had some nice donations come from some players and folks who are looking to help see this thing built up. And I'm hoping to chat with Darby about it as well, because it's really important I think, to show that hockey can flourish in a community like Richfield. We don't have to do hockey the way we're doing it right now. It doesn't have to be 6 days a week in squirts. I don't remember doing that. I don't know why it's like that. It can be on, consistent days and times, so that people with multiple children can have grandparents help easily, or other support systems help to get the kids to the rink. I mean, that's an issue I face with 3 kids. I'm like, I don't know how I do this if they're on three different schedules. So that's some of the change that we're trying to help facilitate.
I love it. So if you're a parent of a young athlete, you happen to listen to this, and you're in the Eden Prairie or Richfield area, please check out Fortis Academy. I think that's the right thing to do. To me, it sounds like they're doing things the right way, and I appreciate that. So Josh, thanks for coming on today, pal. And this has been great. Really appreciate the talk we had. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sean.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Thanks, Josh. Have a great day,
Yeah.
pal. Thanks
See
again.
ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.